when he didn't come home and his deer came home, which he was so attached to. I mean, that's just one thing I always think about. Um, we lived in a very rural, one road in, one road out. Everybody knows everybody, even to today. Everybody knows everybody there. And from that short time, from his little walk, and I'm not sure, I think it's about a mile as far as I know, 15, 20 minutes, everything changed. It's kind of strange, where certain things, stick out all your life. And I remember on Christmas Day, because he and I were close, because my two brothers were really like roughhouse boys, really. And he was more of a mild mannered. And I remember sitting behind him, and all the boys had buzz haircuts. And I was sitting there behind him combing his buzz hair, and we were playing Fort Apache, the little figurines, cowboy and Indian game on the floor with him and setting up them. And that was my last recollection, was on Christmas Day, he and I sitting on the floor. No one had ever come over to our house, babysitting us or something like that. So, um, and of course she was there watching us when Bobby didn't come home. I think the brothers came home around 2 o'clock. They were supposed to be home at, or everyone was supposed to be home at 4. Um, and Bobby decided, so this is the story, Bobby wanted to stay longer to play with the Hance boys. And it was still light outside. So the two brothers came home on their way. And apparently, I don't know exactly, maybe hour and 15 minutes later, he left the house, the Hance boys' house. And the mother had said that she had watched him through the kitchen window walking down the street with his pet deer, Pete, until she couldn't see him any longer. So somewhere between there and the house, which is probably about a mile, I would assume, he disappears in thin air.
So looking at this case, December 26th, 1968, Bobby Boys goes missing. His family, his mom and dad, Jane Boys and Richard Boys, they called the police at around maybe 7:30 p.m. and said, hey, we haven't seen our child since about noon. He should have been home. He was playing at a friend's house, and we can't find him. He knows like the woods. He always goes in the woods. He's always playing, so we're not too concerned, but it is December and it's freezing cold outside, so we need some help.
And I'm only 3 years old at that point, so I recall seeing a helicopter, because we had 10 acres of land. I recall seeing a helicopter in the property. And I guess that might have been the reserves, Army reserves. I'm not sure. I think that's what it was. I don't recall a lot of that.
So police come down, and I think some volunteer firefighters from that area and the rescue squad, they all come down, they're searching, and they can't find him. So it gets to be a little bit too dark, and they stop that search at that point. They come out the next, I want to say 4 or 5 days from like the break of morning until like the evening time. They have over 100 volunteers. They have helicopters and planes in the area, and they're looking for some type of trace of Bobby Boys. And nothing can be found. It's just like he vanished and there's no trace of him. I would assume you would find something, maybe a shoe if there was like an accident with an animal or something, some clothing, maybe someone heard a scream. So all the investigators, they start talking to some neighbors, and they try to kind of, maybe they pry into like a little bit of the boy's family. And I think here's where it kind of got odd.
When I was 3 years old and 4 years old, these boys got to know something. Something is missing. There's a missing link somewhere. I don't know if there's fear in them. My father's passed away at 59 years old. So, I mean, that shouldn't even, if that had something to do with it. But like you said, they're all saying something else, and no one talks about it.
So they started looking into the family, and they asked the family, mom and dad, to take a polygraph test. They both agree Jane passes with flying colors, but Richard Boyce, the father, he shows deception on that exam. And he shows deception on the point of, do you know where Bobby Boyce is and what happened to him? So I think police really started to look at Richard Boyce as a suspect at that time. No evidence could ever be found on Richard Boyce. The case goes cold after some months. They still talk to neighbors. They still search areas. They do everything they possibly can, but nothing can really be found. There was a few things that were suspicious. For Christmas, Bobby Boyce got a watch, and it was only one day, but he wouldn't take this watch off. Come out to find maybe like 2 or 3 days later, Richard Boyce had this watch on him, and he gave it to someone. So it was odd that he had that watch on him. It was always my suspicion, reading through that case file, that Richard Boyce had something to do with Bobby's disappearance.
I think my father had something to do with it. I can just leave it at that.
I couldn't prove that, obviously. Richard Boyce died in 1996 down in Florida. One of the investigators who unfortunately passed away a few months ago, Greg Cameron, he reached out to Richard Boyce in Florida and said, look, you're on your deathbed. Can you help me out? Can you help the family out? We want to close this case and give them closure. Can you put in like your will where he's buried or what happened? Unfortunately, Richard died, and there was no trace of what happened from him. And Jane has also passed away, so the case has gone cold.
To my mother's dying day, I kid you not, and that was, she died in 2019. I remember literally, I knew she had a couple strokes and things, and I know my time was limited, and she was moving back to Florida to be with my oldest brother. I mean, just shy of shaking her, like screaming, trying to, tell me what you know, please, please. This is the last chance I'm going to get face to face. And I always did that to her, and nothing came of it. Just something, just something, please. And I got her so upset. I probably caused a stroke. You know what I mean? But it was my last chance to try to, get something out of her that maybe could be, important to somebody.
I think one of the hardest things is not being able to talk to the people that were there back in 1968. Obviously, a lot of people have died and are deceased, and a lot of people were going off of their memory from 50 years later. So some of the stories I really couldn't take for face value. I guess I'll say there was some that had some discrepancies compared to like different stories. So it was very tough with that.
Do you believe that your brother is still living?
No, no.
At what point did you kind of come to that realization or opinion?
I mean, I guess after decades, you always hope. And then, like I said, when you hear something from Facebook, I think I saw him, back Maryland. I mean, it's not the first time. I've heard it a couple times. Of course, there goes the glimmer of hope. You know what I mean? Maybe someone adopted him. Maybe, who knows? But I mean, I think after 55 years and with the way DNA is and such, that if he was, I mean, most everyone does some sort of DNA at some point for whatever reason, that would have come back, promising. But I mean, it'd be a true miracle. I pray about it. Of course, a miracle is a miracle. But, like I said, I just want to know, what happened, or, closure.
Do you feel like that you're going to get that closure?
No, I don't. But I'm not going to stop.